Hi everybody, Frank Finance here. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we're going to address the question, should you own a credit card? Now in order to address that, we're going to go over some questions for self-reflection. We're going to look at some unhealthy and common mistakes with credit cards, and then we're going to look at some of those healthy habits that people who use credit cards appropriately have. And then lastly, I'm going to give the highlights of each of those. Now I just want to highlight the phrasing of the question, should you own a credit card? Now, emphasis on own. You want to make sure that you're owning your credit cards, not that the credit card is owning you in your life. So just keep that in mind as we go throughout the rest of the video. I do videos on personal finance, investing, and stock analysis. So if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. Also hit that thumbs up button if you like this video at any point. Now to the content. So when we attempt to answer that question, you need to start thinking about how you use debt in your life. Credit cards are a debt tool that you can use for your benefit, or it can be used against you. So a couple questions, or a few questions that you'd like to ask yourself is, do you currently have a problem with debt? Do you have a lot of car loans? Do you have several credit card debt? What is going on with your overall debt profile, not just your credit card usage? Next question you want to ask yourself is, are you living on less than you make? That simply means is how much money you're bringing on every month versus how much money is going out. And if you're actually spending more money than you're making every month, you have a debt problem. And it kind of helps address that first one as well. And then the last one, do I have a credit card debt problem? So this is specifically looking at credit cards. This is going to be addressing, are you using them appropriately on the right things? Are you paying them off every month? Some of those different types of questions to start thinking about how you're using your credit cards and your overall debt profile in your life. Now let's talk about some common mistakes. The first one on the list is definitely the biggest problem. It's carrying a credit card balance month to month. The second one I want to talk about is owning credit cards for points. And thirdly, opening multiple credit cards. Now the first and biggest problem on this list is carrying a credit card balance month to month. The biggest reason is it takes compounding interest, one of the most powerful tools you can use, and it turns it against you. So if you want to learn more about compounding interest, see this video here. Next, high interest payments. So what happens is you get charged an interest payment, sometimes could be as high as 17 to mid 20s, high 20s as a percentage. And then that carries over to your next payment. You pay the minimum, and now you're paying interest upon the interest. And that's just a problem. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't be purchasing it. And then lastly, if you're carrying a high credit card balance as a percentage of the total credit that you have available, for example, if you have a $2,000 or a $1,000 credit limit on your credit card, and you have above 30% utilization, meaning you have more than $300 of credit on that balance, that's going to hurt your credit score. So you want to be very careful with that. Credit cards, as we'll talk about earlier, can be a very powerful tool for your credit building, but if you're carrying too high of a balance, you're going to be starting to hurt your credit score. All right, so mistake number 2 is owning your credit card for points. Now, this isn't always a bad thing. Earning points can actually be a good thing. However, what I see this is kind of a bait and switch. People throw it out there. People get attracted to opening up a new credit card for some perceived points. Maybe it's airline miles. Maybe it's like points for restaurants, points for gas, whatever it may be. What ends up happening is the people who are usually attracted to it for points are the ones that are abusing their credit cards. They're carrying that balance month to month. And the perceived benefit of the points to them may outweigh what they're actually paying in their interest. But what's actually happening is the way they're able to pay and give you those points, well, they charge you high interest payments, and you actually ended up being on the losing side of it. So don't be swayed by the allure of points just to open up a credit card. This third issue here is opening multiple credit cards. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have multiple credit cards. I'm not a huge supporter of owning multiple credit cards, but I'm not mad if you're using your credit cards appropriately and you're not carrying a balance month to month on all of those. The reason why I see this as a mistake is people, they lose sight of multiple things. If they have too many things rolling around, especially if they start having 5, 6, they have all these credit cards, and they start to forget. It could be simple. Well, which card am I using? They start to max out one and then they switch to another, and they start to use it as as leverage to live into a lifestyle instead of using it as a tool. As anything in finance is just a tool, and if you're using it inappropriately, it can be it can be a negative thing. And so, in general, I would say you just use one or two credit cards. Try to stay away from opening multiple. I understand that some people open multiple for those points, but as I mentioned earlier, if you're carrying a balance month to month, the points aren't going to outweigh what you're paying in interest payments. So just keep that in mind. Those are the top 3 common mistakes I've seen people who own and don't use credit cards appropriately. Hey, if you like this type of content, please hit that thumbs up button. It helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Also, please consider subscribing if you like this type of content. More to come in the future. All right, next up I want to talk about some healthy habits for credit card usage. The first one, and I've mentioned this several times now, is paying off your credit card full every month. This is basically just acting as if it's a debit card. You're not using it as a debt to leverage your lifestyle. You're using it just to build your credit score. So that brings me into my second point here, is using credit cards as a way to help build your credit score. Now, there's 3 things here. Is the duration of how long you've had your credit card helps build your score. A high credit balance can also help build your score. Now, let me talk about some of the components of why this is. Because one, payment history. As long as you're paying your credit cards month to month, that makes up 35% of your credit score. The amount history. So this is where I talked about credit utilization earlier. If your credit utilization is less than 30%, now if you're doing what I say and you're paying your credit cards every month, it should be very close, close to 0%. And that's another 30% of your overall credit score. So this is huge. Like credit utilization, if you're carrying a balance or a large balance, this is really going to impact your credit score. Credit history. So the age of your credit card. If you've had a credit card for years and years and years, this is going to be very good. And again, make sure you're paying them off. That's 15% of your score. And then lastly, credit mix is 10% of your score. Now this is more things like mortgages, student loans, your credit cards factor into this, car loans. But having your credit card and maybe a mortgage, those 2 things are pretty healthy, can be healthy debt tools. So as long as you're paying that credit card off every month and your mortgage payment isn't totally out of line with what your income is making. But this is how a credit card can be a powerful tool. It actually hits 4 categories out of the 5 of how credit scores are calculated. So payment history, amount history, credit history, and credit mix are all impacted. And the biggest one there is that amount history of credit utilization. So you just want to make sure that's below 30%. And the way you make sure that happens is pay your credit cards off every single month. All right, to sum up, whether you should own a credit card is if you're carrying a balance month to month, maybe credit card ownership isn't for you. Second, if you have an issue building up your credit, maybe you should consider opening up a credit card if you're not doing number 1, carrying a balance month to month. And then lastly, if you have multiple credit cards, consider reducing the amount of credit cards you currently have outstanding, especially if you're either not using them or you're carrying balances month to month. So again, I cannot stress that carrying a balance on your credit card from a month to month perspective is a terrible idea. Stay away from that as much as possible. And hopefully that hopefully helps you address the answer, should you own a credit card? I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Frank Finance.